Welcome to AstroFic, your dose of fun, relatable astrology content where we apply astrology to fictional characters to find out why they're like that. I'm your host, Celeste V, and this week we're talking about none other than the one and only beloved Finnick Odair. But before we get into it, I know I have to explain my absence. A full month. I'm recording this on April 9th. It has been a full month since the last time I posted, and I apologize very deeply. I just need you to know that every astrologer was right. This double retrograde and eclipses took my ass out. March was not my month, you guys. Very, very bad over here for me in the mental and emotional kind of way. I'm not joking. I tried recording this episode 3 times since the last episode came out on March 9th. I tried recording Finnick Odair's episode 3 times and it just didn't work. And the third time after it didn't work, something went wrong again, and I recorded for like 20 minutes and then it went wrong and then it was gone. And so that happened for the third time. And I said, all right, it's Mercury retrograde. This episode is not meant to be recorded. So I just didn't record it, and Mercury retrograde ended 2 days ago. So now I'm here. We are in the post shadow of the Mercury retrograde though, so fingers crossed this works. I will say already, this is like, I don't know, the 4th time I've tried this introduction. So we're not out of the woods yet. Yeah, and also just if you didn't know, the thing about being an astrologer is that, yeah, you might know the energy of what's about to happen, but you never know how it's going to specifically impact you. And March really kicked my ass. Okay. My grant has not been defunded, so I still have a job, and I've applied to full-time jobs. But as you may or may not know, the job market is terrible, so we'll see how that goes. And also, I got rejected from every graduate school that I applied to, so that was lovely. Yeah, so we'll see how this phase of my life turns out. So yeah, March kind of kicked my ass. So we're gonna just forgive me for not posting in March, and we're gonna move on. And we're gonna move on with the potential of more things, more astrology related things coming from me your way soon, and other things potentially. There's a lot going on in my life, and there's I got a lot of spinning plates, you see. So let me complete these tricks, and then I'll let you know how it turns out. For now, let's turn our attention to Finnick Odair. Because you guys don't want to hear about me anymore. You skipped all that, and now you're just interested because I said Finnick Odair. So let's talk about him now. All right, give you a little taste. His big 3. You ready? Sun in Sagittarius. Love it. Fun and flirty. Moon in Taurus. Also a vibe. Exalted moon. Rising. Where we will begin our episode. You guys might hate this, but I love it. I think it's really good. I gave him a Gemini rising. I can hear the boos already. I can hear everybody booing me. Get off the stage. I will not. I will speak my truth. And my truth is that Finnick Odair is a Gemini rising. There is quite literally nothing more Gemini than dealing in information. That he's so mercurial in his core. information and what he is and isn't allowed to say is so important to his character. It's why Katniss doesn't trust him at first, because he's so coy, and he has to be coy. And she has the same opinion of Plutarch Heavensby also. And so Plutarch Heavensby is giving mercurial vibes as well, by the way. But it's not that the vibes are sinister or ominous. They're just a little trickster, and you're not sure what you're going to get from this guy. So Katniss doesn't want to trust him. And also, being the youngest Hunger Games winner ever is insane. That gets you a certain kind of reputation that is hard to live down. But I'll return to my main point of there is nothing more Gemini than dealing in information. God, yeah, when he's like, that's like the first, it's also the first thing that he says to Katniss, you know what I mean? It's the forward facing persona that he inhabits, and I think it's also the most honest, is that the only thing that interests him is information, and he says that to her up front. And part of it is like a poke, a prod to see how she is as a Mockingjay, because he's part of the rebellion. And another part of it is she would make a great ally in the games, period. And allies need to know at least some of the essential truths of your being. Yeah, so if you don't like my choice for his rising sign, talk to the wall. Argue with the wall. I think it's a great choice. But he doesn't, I didn't give him any other Gemini placements. Don't hate me. I just felt like it was so perfect. And I like the way that it put everything else in his chart. So that is his first house. He has nothing in Cancer in the second house, but he does have one placement in the third house in Leo. So we know third house is the house of communication. So this is very important to him as a Gemini rising. I believe that this is the house that Gemini traditionally rules. So very important. He has his Saturn here in Leo. In some capacities, I think that he does want to be the center of attention, but the fact that this is the energy that people always assume that he has on first meeting is like the cross that he has to bear with this Saturn placement. This sounds a little unserious, like now saying it out loud, but it can be exhausting playing a character, you know, and when you're expected to do that all the time because of like social obligations, or because people don't see you as a person, but rather as a caricature of yourself, it can be really exhausting to be the center of attention. Saturn in Leo is really giving, like, this is the kind of person who wants to like lie low, but can't. It's like Saturn in Leo is the kind of placement that would spawn the idea of a Hannah Montana-esque celebrity personality, you know, that's a disguise from your normal self, a costume from your normal self. Also, Saturn in the third house restricts how vocal that Finnick can be about things, but ultimately, because he can't be vocal about things from the beginning, the longer he holds on to them plays into how impactful the release of that information that he has is. That's Saturn's effect, right? Is that over time, things become more powerful, more impactful, more potent even, you know what I mean? I also just think that this makes him the perfect kind of person to run a distraction. Like, it does not surprise me that when the District 13 team was like, we need a distraction, they were like, oh, kind of immediately? Finnick can do it. We got this. He just exudes that energy, Gemini rising. He can just talk for ever, Saturn and Leo. I really think that, like, yes, it restricts how vocal he can be, but I feel like also he can just yap forever and ever and ever about nothing if he needed to. But in this case, it was the distraction that he led was with pertinent information or world shattering information in some cases. Like, it's very personal information about capital bigwigs, He has absolutely no Virgo placements. I was going to say he doesn't have any Earth placements, but that's not true, like, even at all. He just doesn't have any Virgo placements. He's not super mutable, So nothing in the 4th house, nothing in the 5th house of Libra either. But he does have placements, plural or just one? He has one placement in the 6th house of Scorpio. And you'll never guess what it is. It's his ruling planet. It's Mercury. I gave him a Scorpio Mercury. It's not like the best place, but it's also not the worst place. You know what I mean? Also, Tally for Scorpio Mercury. I just think as somebody with a Scorpio Mercury, my natal Mercury is also in retrograde. So, like, this is really a testament to how well I think of my Mercury, even knowing the challenges I have with it. I think a Mercury in Scorpio is tea. Like, I think it's such a good Mercury placement, especially for somebody who finds themselves dealing in a political playground like Finnick Odair does, or any of the tributes, or any of the, I should say, victors, or capital people or government people, find themselves in. This placement is tea. I don't care what you say. His mercurial traits and leanings form the foundation of his values. So, like, this placement ultimately forms the foundation of his values. So, like, what I mean by that is that Finnick can be kind of underhanded. He is not afraid to fight dirty. He is somebody who is like, just do whatever you need to do to get the things that you need done. Like, he is just so willing to go to bat, ride or die for him and his, and make sure that everybody in his circle is taken care of and protected. That is what I mean by this trait, by this placement, I should say, forming the foundation of his values. It's in the 6th house. It's not like the 2nd house is the house of, like, values and stuff like that. But I just think that because Mercury rules over logic and reason and the mind and stuff like this, and he's a Gemini rising, this is his ruling planet, and the way that his mind works, I think, really determines logically what his values are. And his values lie also in opposition to the capital. And so a lot of the things that he wants to provide for the people in his inner circle are things that the capital doesn't want citizens to have. They don't want them to have food and housing and clothing and nice things, Also, there's I think, in my opinion, there's a very distinct disconnect between his Mercury and his moon sign, because, as we discussed very briefly earlier, I mentioned it earlier, his moon sign is in Taurus. Taurus and Scorpio are opposite each other because they're sister signs, so they're directly opposing each other, which creates this tension and, in my opinion, a sort of disconnect between his Mercury and his moon sign. But I think that this tension that he ultimately disconnects from is necessary for him to operate every day. Otherwise, he'd be full of despair. Like, if he was tapped into that tension every day, his mind would be a maze of sorrow and despair, truly. Also, nothing more Scorpio Mercury than secrets. Secrets every day. 6th house, daily life. That's what he's doing day in, day out, is secrets, information, dealing in it. Also, Scorpio is often associated with sex, so that's like how Finnick gets that information. Like it all just makes so much sense to me. And now you're not hating on that Gemini rising so much anymore, are you? You realize like, oh, maybe the crazy person's got the right idea about astrology, huh? Anyways, so that's his Scorpio 6th house. We're gonna move on. Sagittarius 7th house. This is where his sun is. This is the only Sagittarius placement he has. Here for a good time, not a long time. That's what this placement is. The Sagittarius sun invented the phrase "here for a good time, not a long time." Swear to God. Also coined by Sagittarius sun, YOLO. Probably also coined by Sagittarius sun, party rockers in the house tonight. I don't know if either of the men from the band LMFAO are Sagittariuses, but I assume one of them has to have Sagittarius somewhere. That's the only way they could make songs like that. Kesha, I believe, is also a Sagittarius. Here for a good time, not a long time. All right? Again, Finnick is interested in being in the center of attention, but doesn't always want to do that. However, he is willing to do that constantly for those he's pretty close to, has formed a long-lasting bond with. The 7th house is the house of long relationships of any kind. This can be business, romantic. I think it can be platonic also. And I think that it represents the individual relationships, long-lasting relationships that you form with these individual people. Contracts are a part of this. He's, when he has committed to something, he is willing to continue the persona that he committed to it with. He's committed to the bit, kind of, I think is a little bit how it's working. This can also feel to him and the other party potentially as kind of transactional. I think Finnick in general can be kind of transactional, wondering what's in it for him. But I think he has pretty good discernment for who he can be like that towards. He's very close with Mags, and he's in love with Annie. Two women. Mags is much older. Annie is, well, sorry, I don't know how else to say it, but she's crazy. And he takes care of both of them. And he never wonders what's in it for him when it comes to them, because he knows there's nothing in it for him. And I think that's what he craves, is that upfront, I know I can get this from you, or I can get nothing from you, or, but he just wants to know very upfront what the social exchange with a person will be like, which I don't think is a bad thing. But maybe a little socially frowned upon sometimes. And I think that's kind of the vibe check that he's giving to Katniss when he first meets her with the sugar cube and stuff. It's just kind of like what kind of person are you? What can I get from you? What can you get from me? How can we help each other in this kind of ally way? And Katniss isn't into it. So, all right, now we're getting into it. We're fucking cooking with gas over here. The 8th house is where it gets really interesting. I don't know why I did this, but his chart is very top heavy. He's got a sun chart. It's really facing the world, I think this speaks to him leaving a legacy, but not really having a very long life. That's kind of how I look at it. Sorry. Y'all on TikTok can claim that he's alive and happy with Annie and his sun all you fucking want, but that motherfucker's dead in the ground, and we must acknowledge that in order to accurately read his birth chart that I made. So unserious. Anyways, so we're starting the 8th house with his Venus in Capricorn in the 8th house. Yep, I gave him an 8th house Venus. We stand an 8th house Venus placement because they're crazy bitches, me included, hey. But it also means that he's a ride hard, die hard for the people that he loves. Obviously, we just talked about that with Mags and Annie. He'll do anything for them, obviously. And obviously, crazy bitches love other crazy bitches. Hello, him and Annie. And I like everything that I've just said also is a combination of the fact that it's Venus in Capricorn in the 8th house. Like, if you removed even one of those elements, none of this would be true. He wouldn't be a crazy bitch. He wouldn't be ride hard, die hard for the people that he loves. And he wouldn't love other crazy bitches. So all of this together is what makes him like this, in my opinion. But I personally really love it. You know, also Capricorn is the sign of legacy. And even though he is dead, he did have a son. His legacy continues on quite literally and physically in his son. And it had to come at the expense of his death. Did it have to come at the expense of his death? I don't know if his kid would have lived if he didn't die and they didn't complete the mission. So, you know, war is cruel and war is senseless. Suzanne Collins wrote war very well because we all wanted Finnick to live. We all wanted Prim to live, and she killed them anyways. Because that's what it means, you know? Like, the people you love the most are the ones who are going to die. I mean, not literally. That's not literally what that means. But, like, they could still, and there's a very good chance that they will. Yeah, just a lot of dark stuff happening here in the 8th house, as it should be, honestly. And I'm not done either. We've got 2 more. I gave him a Jupiter and Capricorn in the 8th house. And a lot of what I said about Venus can also apply here, about his son and his legacy and stuff, you know. But also, this adds another layer to him being a crazy bitch. And I know, listen, I'm hearing myself too. And I know it doesn't sound great to say that, but I just want you to know that it's more like an energy within that is not expressed outwardly as much. It's okay. Like, I have it too. So, like, I see it in him, like, behind those blue eyes. I think they're blue. There's a hint of crazy back there that's, like, actually holding back a dam of crazy. And I see it, and I see him hiding it. And I'm just letting you all know that he's hiding it. Joanna doesn't hide it, and we love her for it, right? Finnick hides it, and we also love him for it, you know? Everybody handles their crazy in their own ways, and we respect it. But he is crazy nonetheless. This placement, the Jupiter placement, in my opinion, is where he gets the really juicy secrets from. Jupiter in Capricorn in the 8th house sees Scorpio and Mercury in the 6th house. And I think the degrees between them are not large enough to create, or small enough to create, any sort of aspect that is significant in any way. But I think Jupiter sees Scorpio across the room in the 6th house and goes, I see you, I hear you, I'm with you. And gathers the juice and, like, gets the juicy secrets to be funneled towards the Scorpio Mercury. You know what I mean? I think of astrology in scenes like that, because I think of astrology as like a play. So to me, that is what's happening in the birth chart. I just see it, I feel it, and this is why astrology is like an intuitive thing, but also requires a lot of knowledge and study. Anyways, the 8th house has to do with other people's money usually, but because it has to do with other people's stuff, I think it can also be other people's secrets. So that's where I got the secrets thing from. It's also the house of open enemies. So I think that this gives Finnick like a very methodical approach to defeating these open enemies in a way that almost always works out. I mean, he won his games, first of all. I don't know how deep we go into Finnick's games in Katniss, in Catching Fire, when Katniss and Peeta are watching the clips. I should take a look at that, but I just think that Finnick is so much smarter than he plays, he's so analytical. I gave him that Scorpio Mercury. He's so analytical. The Gemini rising, he's thinking things through very thoroughly. And he's analyzing everything around him. And this Capricorn and Jupiter in the 8th house, when he's studying his enemies that he knows are his enemies, he can develop very precise and specific methods of disposing of said enemies. But ultimately, this makes him a little bit too powerful, a little bit too likable, and will lead to his death. But we loved him while he was here, didn't we, gang? Okay, last placement for the 8th house. Uranus in Capricorn. Uranus is here to shake shit up. Uranus is why Finnick's death was so gruesome, honestly. Very terrible. Horrific, even. For Finnick, everything works out for him until it doesn't. The one time the Jupiter and Venus influences in the 8th house don't save him, Uranus takes over and he's gone, baby. He's gone to chance, and the chances were unfortunately not in his favor. I think that Uranus in Capricorn also makes it so that he kind of flips traditional values, or at least he tries to, or like that's like his ultimate intention or goal. Like especially in the home life, because he's the one taking care of Annie and Mags, and he's happy to do it. Listen, yeah, he can kill some people, but he's giving house husband. I know that's why the girlies love Finnick Odair. It's because he demonstrated that he can take care of a woman in a very precise, specific way that is very loving in its core. So that's one way. But I think also on like the financial idea and the idea of inheritance, which is part of what the 8th house rules, he has a less traditional viewpoint. I think that a character like Finnick is constantly spinning the questions: who should inherit the world? Who should inherit the country? Who should inherit the punishments intended for those that came before them? But these are like the kinds of questions that he deals with like on a daily basis, kind of. Like these are the things that haunt him at night, that he spins incessantly in his mind. I think they inform his choices a lot. And with that Gemini rising, I think that new information leads him to different conclusions. A Scorpio Mercury is hard pressed to change their mind, but if presented with enough information, they will say, oh, I've learned more, and now I think differently. So yeah, that is his 8th house in Capricorn, all 3 of his placements. We move on to his 9th house in Aquarius. He does have 1 planet here. He has at least 1 planet in each of the following houses. So here in the 9th house in Aquarius, we have Neptune. His imagination actually extends pretty far. And I think that in the grand scheme of things, Finnick knew that the world would be okay with or without him. Aquarius usually has this very broad picture view of the world at large, of society, of just the general workings of the world. Aquarius can zoom out really, really, really far. And so with that combined with the imagination energy that Neptune carries, I think Finnick could paint a really clear picture of what the world looked like with or without him, and it was almost exactly the same. And so he knew things would be okay as long as the mission was completed, as long as Snow was killed, as long as Panem was freed from the shackles of Snow and the Hunger Games and all of it. He knew that everything would work out the way that he wanted it to. He really was, to me, one of the revolutionaries that had such a foresight, that could so clearly see the future that he was fighting for, that it made him stand so strongly in his convictions. And that's why he continued on with the mission despite Katniss being wary of him. To hold that bracelet up and say, it helps to know who your enemies are, or whatever, or no, remember who the real enemy is. To hold that bracelet up and say, remember who the real enemy is, when she's pointing a fucking arrow at you, is honestly really, really, really brave. He, like, in her mind, he doesn't really know, how could he know how much Katniss cared for Haymitch in actuality? Like, that is kind of a secret that is kept between them. Maybe she doesn't care what Haymitch has to say about her work in the games, I guess. And she could have killed Finnick anyways. I think it's really brave that he did that, because it wasn't security, you know. It was just like, maybe she'll get the message if we do this. And I think that that's really important. Aquarius is the fixed air sign, so it is the most likely to be stubborn and stand strong and be hard-headed compared to the other air signs, which are pretty notorious for changing their mind. But when Finnick commits to something, he sticks through it. And I think that really is the point of his 9th house in Aquarius. Okay, his 10th house is in Pisces, and he has one placement here. He has Chiron here, the asteroid, the wounded healer. It is in the top half of his chart, which is interesting. It's always interesting when you have the person's earliest, most hard-hitting wound in the top half of the chart, because the top half of the chart is more like external things. The 10th house is like your social standing, your social class, how people in society around you perceive you as a person, as an individual, what kind of person they think you are. With this being in Pisces, I would not be surprised if his earliest wound had to do with him being the youngest Hunger Games victor in history. Like, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. In my head, I don't know if this makes sense to anybody else, but in my head, Pisces is like the baby sibling of the zodiac. It's the last one. It's the youngest. And I think it really has kind of youngest child energy. But being the youngest Hunger Games victor in history is a lot. The attention, the money, the fame, quote unquote, all very detrimental to a 14-year-old. I studied developmental psychology. I know for a fact that all of that kind of stuff on such a large scale is traumatic to the young brain, trying to learn and adapt as it gets older. And also, this event resulted in so many other forms of trauma for Finnick. Him winning the games is why he had to go through so much. How do I say this? Because Finnick won the games is why President Snow started selling him. And this action caused so many other traumas to his young brain. It's very disconcerting. And I know I made a lot of jokes about him being, crazy or whatever. But when I talk about the victors and tributes being crazy, I do mean in the way that complex trauma makes you crazy. Because it does make you crazy. Katniss wakes Haymitch up with water and he starts swinging a knife at her. That's crazy. And I make light of it a little bit because this is media and it's fun, but it is sad and serious because of what Suzanne Collins was intending to comment on when she wrote these novels. So had to make it somber just to remind you this is media and it is meant for entertainment, but in some cases entertainment media is also meant to impart lessons or impart information or wisdom or whatever. So all that being said, while all of this trauma was happening to Finnick, he was likely still seeing and or experiencing oppression in his home district. So it was a very kind of dissonant experience, I'm sure, is what I'm theorizing, where he's so young and he's like, oh my God, I won and I get all this stuff and I'm the youngest in history and now everybody's fawning after me and all this stuff. So all that's happening, but then when he's home, he is probably, from what we've seen of other victors, constantly surveilled and just prevented from doing all of the things that he wants at the very least. And so he's realizing that after he wins, he actually has less freedom than before. And it's very disorienting. And I'm sure that there's still some kind of split that exists in Finnick's brain between his capital persona and his district persona. And I think he can turn it, or at least he used to be able to turn it off and on pretty easily. But I'm not so sure anymore. At least not by the time we meet him in Catching Fire. After 12 years of that kind of abuse, you probably just leave it on all the time. Especially since Finnick was involved in the rebellion. All right. So moving on to the 11th house. The 11th house also only has one placement here. The 11th house is in Aries. And here we have Pluto. The 11th house represents community and friendships and social groups and stuff like that. I think that with this placement, Finnick's tactic for changing the world and operating within community spaces is constantly shifting and changing. I feel like maybe when he was younger, he had smaller ideas of creating community change, maybe. I'm just making guesses because we actually don't know a lot about Finnick's history in District 4. But I think that he goes from a very quiet revolutionary to a very vocal public figure for the revolution to a martyr. And those are just the big, steps in the progression. And I think that he's definitely seen as like a leader or a pillar of his community. I think maybe also this could have been taught to him by Mags, because one of the things that we do know is that Mags kind of took him under her wing after he won, which is why he looks up to her so much, sees her as such a mother figure. Basically his mom, actually, I think is what they say. And so I think that she instilled a lot of these values within him. But he has his own identity and his own ideas, and so he's implementing things and shifting things and changing things and trying to decide how he wants to impact the world. And ultimately, in Aries, the way that he impacts the world is through being a warrior. That was one of his greatest gifts to the revolution. And he died in service to the revolution, which is not, as the way Suzanne Collins writes it, is not as noble as some might have you think. Because again, war is cruel and war is senseless. And now we move to the 12th house, which is in Taurus. We have our last two placements here, and then the episode's done. So we're going to start with the one that you guys kind of already know, which is his moon sign. His moon in Taurus in the 12th house. The moon is exalted in Taurus. This is great. His moon is actually the same as Katniss's sun sign. Katniss is a Taurus sun. So having his moon, having her sun in his 12th house, that's what happens when you do synastry, like their placements are in your houses. Having her sun in his 12th house is what makes Katniss kind of wary of him, because she doesn't quite understand the vibes that she's getting from him, and she doesn't quite understand her feelings around him, because she's 16 and he's hot, point blank, period. The 12th house is the house of hidden enemies, and it seems that Finnick is often distrustful of his emotions because, again, he's very mercurial and very logical. So his moon sits in the 12th house, kind of opposing his mercurial logical side. And so he's like distrustful of his emotions and creating this disconnect once again. That's not to say that he's out of touch with his emotions. They're just definitely not the first priority for him, because he recognizes how acting from emotions doesn't yield the best or the most desired results. Again, a very logical mercurial thing to do. So that's great. His last placement for Finnick Odair is his Mars in Taurus in the 12th house. His Mars in the same house as his moon is crazy work, TBH. That's the first note that I wrote in my notes. So yeah. Then I wrote paranoia, the placements. Yeah. Mars and moon together, especially in the 12th house. Yeah, that's going to cause some paranoia. I don't care what sign it's in. That's going to cause some paranoia. They make him very aware of the concept of hidden enemies, but he's not necessarily the most adept at spotting them. It's not that he's easily fooled. It's just that sometimes someone can know exactly how to get through your barriers. They hit a blind spot that you didn't know you had. And Taurus is the bull. Bulls have blind spots. This placement, to me, Mars and Taurus in the 12th house, points to him using a traumatic series of events as a way of furthering his own status. And who can blame him, really? We've all done it. I've written sob stories in scholarship essays about being homeless and abused and blah, blah, blah. It's all true, but the way you write it matters, you know? He definitely uses it to get ahead, and I don't blame him, and we shouldn't blame him for that, actually. However, despite being incredibly paranoid and distrustful, he recognizes that same paranoia and distrustfulness in Katniss, and he's like, "Oh, twins? We're cool then." He warms up to Katniss immediately. I think it's more Peeta that he's like not too sure about, because Peeta's really good at playing a guy, you know? He's just really good at his Hunger Games persona, his character that he plays when the cameras are on. And I think Finnick can kind of sense that, but then he meets Katniss for real IRL in the flesh, and then he goes, "Oh shit, you can't even hide that you're like me. At least I can hide it. I don't need to worry about you." He is distrustful of whether or not she loves Peeta, but everything else he's fully down with, you know? And then she proves, like, she's just herself and proves that she's in love with Peeta, and he's like, "Oh shit, all right, well, yeah, we're super cool then." And then they kind of become besties, believe it or not. And that's the story of Finnick Odair. This was a deeply kind of unserious episode, and I think that's the way he would have wanted it, to be quite honest with you. So yeah, just so you know, plugs, announcements, whatever. Didn't get into grad school, so if you are looking for an astrology reading, a birth chart reading for you or a loved one, or you're looking for a tarot reading on almost anything, please hit my line. I'm desperate. And also just kind of like be on the lookout. I know I kind of like wiped mine and AstroFic's social media presence off the face of planet Earth, but it's because I'm rebuilding, I'm rebranding, okay? So bear with me. I felt bad that I hadn't had an episode out in like a month, because I totally could have. I've just been super down in the dumps. Got hit with the retrogrades really badly, so, and the eclipses. So please forgive me. Just know that I have more stuff I'm cooking up. I have more plans. Stuff is on the way, kind of. And I think summer of 25 is where we're gonna get lit, you guys. I believe in us because I'm not in school anymore. And I won't be for at least another year. So fuck it, we ball, guys, you know? All right. You've been listening to AstroFic, your favorite astrology podcast by me, Celeste Fee. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please don't forget to leave a rating and review. If you're one of our new YouTube listeners, please leave a like and a comment. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Love you. Bye.